Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how delegates work in C#. So delegate is something that holds a reference to a method or a set of methods that have same return type and same set of parameters, the number of parameters and the type of parameters. So let's see how delegates work in C#. So to demo this, I'm going to create an item and basically use delegate to invoke the methods that we are referencing using that delegate when the price of that item changes. So let's go ahead and add an item called item.cs. Now this would be this would have a private variable of type integer called price, and then let's create a property out of it. Now since this is private, it will not be accessible outside this particular class, so let's go ahead and create a public property to encapsulate it. By convention this would be uppercase and the private variables would be in lowercase. Let's go ahead and implement this. So we'll just return the price, and in set we will basically go ahead and say price is equal to value. But before that we can say that if value is not equal to 0, then only you do this, right? So that makes sense. So we have an item, we have a price in it, and we have a getter setter for its public property, and only if the value is not set to 0, then we go ahead and update the price. And as you know that the primitive value, default value of int is 0, so this by default will be set to 0, so no need to explicitly set this as 0. So let's go ahead and create a delegate now. So we'll create a delegate saying add new item, we'll call it price changed delegate, and click on add. So this is not a class but a delegate. We'll make it public. Now what is important is its return type. So its return type would be void, and the arguments. So in arguments we can say int old price and int new price. So this particular delegate can reference any method that has a return type of void and original price, two arguments with integer types. And delegates do not have any implementation since it is just a reference. So now that we have created our delegate, let's go ahead and add it in our item class. So we'll create a delegate private. As you know, we'll have to make it public since this needs to be changed using our outside of this class. So as you know, the public methods needs to be by convention start with uppercase letter, so that is why we have put it as uppercase. Now let's go ahead and try to invoke this. So we would invoke this in the setter method of price only when the price has changed. So what we'll do is we'll say if price not equal to value, then you go ahead and invoke this particular delegate, right? With old value, so old value was price and new value was value. Now make sure you make this change before you assign the new value to the price, right? That way you can capture the old as well as new value. Now just to summarize, what we are doing here is that in the setter method we are first checking whether value is not equal to 0, because there's no point setting a price of an item to 0, and only if the price, the new value of the price is not equal to the price that was set before, which means that the price has changed now, we basically invoke this method. right? So now that we have all of this in place, let's go ahead in our start code and try to see how that works. So this is a sample start code which has public static void main, which is the point where our program starts. So let's go ahead and create an instance of item. Okay, and now what we are going to do is we are going to say item dot price is equal to 100. Now this should essentially go ahead and change the price from 0 to 100 and invoke our callback. But before we do that, we have to actually provide the method that our delegate references to. So let's create that public static. As you know, the delegate had void return type, so this must be the same, and we'll say price changed callback, and let's correct the convention, and the argument is int old price and int new price. Now once we have done that, let's go ahead and console dot write line. We'll just say price changed from old price to new price. So this should suffice. Now all we need to do is go ahead and set up this delegate item dot property change. Now this is the delegate that we had defined. Since it is public, it is accessible here now, so we can say new price change delegate, and let's go ahead and add this, and let's try to run this and see what happens. Alright, so we did not add a stopping criteria, so let me go ahead and add that. Console dot read key, and let's go ahead and run it again. And as you can see, you get the callback saying price changed from 0 to 100, right? So our delegate is working fine now. Now another thing that I wanted to show you is that a delegate can reference multiple methods, right? So let's go ahead and add that and see how we can do that. Let's call this 1, let's call this 2, and we'll just add which method is calling it. Now the change in the particular delegate is that you cannot just say equal to something, right? This is 1, so we'll have to use a slightly different operator called plus, which essentially means you are adding this method reference into the list of existing method reference that the delegate refers to, right? So you can do the same thing using similar syntax for callback 2, and if you run this, you can see that it is called back from both of the methods, right? So you can have as many method callbacks as you want here, and the delegate should work. So the next thing that I wanted to show you is that you do not really need to use a new operator here, because C# compiler is intelligent enough to figure that out, and you can simply use the method reference and not use a new, and you would see that it would return the similar result, right? So that was the other thing that I wanted to show you. And finally, what I wanted to show you is that in a normal delegate, what you can do is you can set it as null, which will basically set all of this method references to null, so none of these will be called back. So you are basically adding reference to callback 1, callback 2, and then you are clearing out, right? However, if you run this code, you'll probably get an exception, because since this is null, and if you go back to the item and we are directly invoking here without null check, right? So that is going to throw a null reference exception. So we could probably add if not equal to null, execute this, right? So that's for our safety, that we do not get any null reference exception. So let's go ahead and try to run this, and we should ideally not see any exceptions. or any output because we cleared it out. But this is potentially very hazardous because in a multi-user environment, if multiple users have set their callbacks and a person sets it as null, then all of the changes of all of the users is gone, right? However, C# provides a way to address this. So for this, you need to use event. So all you have to do is go ahead and mark this delegate as an event, and you can, if you go back to the program.cs, you'll see that the compiler is showing an error, right? That you cannot do this. Since this is an event, you will not be able to do this. So we'll have to remove this and rerun our program, and you can see everything is back to normal, right? So that's about the delegate. You can use delegates to reference methods. It's just like a pointer to a method, and you can use that delegate to invoke those method references. And as you saw, that method references that are added can change at runtime. So delegates are basically used to abstract that logic out and call all of these methods asynchronously, right? So the typical example is a button listener, right? So in any UI component, if you have a button, you can add as many button click listeners as you want, and when the button is clicked, all of those particular methods will be called, and that is done exactly using this, which is a delegate. So delegate is the typical example of observer pattern, where you basically register your methods, and when an event happens, all of these gets called back, right? So that's all for delegate. Do let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.